Haven's POV.
The waiting room at the hospital was cold. Cold and white and clean and filled with the sense of disinfectant, stale coffee, and anxiety. I sat quietly in place in my chair with my book bag, scanning the room, watching the waiting family members of the other patients in this wing of the hospital. I also watched the nurses as they came and went from the unit. The amount of people in the waiting room dwindled, and the darkening sky outside signaled the approaching end of visiting hours. And, yet again, they had not allowed me to go back to see my dad. "Come on, kiddo," Scott said as he walked towards me from the restroom. "It's time to head home." "Mom?" He grimaced. "She's staying here again. I guess they're giving her a few more nights of it before they tell her she can't anymore." I nodded and grabbed my bag and followed him out to his car. It had been the same routine for several weeks. School, hospital waiting room, home, repeat. Except, home kept changing. Some nights it was Scott's house, some nights Tiffany's, but never my actual home. I clutched my book bag to my chest the entire drive to Scott's house. Inside, I had not only my school supplies, but also my blanket. Unfortunately, all my letters and my music box from Wesley were still at my house, because I couldn't fit them in with everything else. But I had taken to bringing my blanket everywhere with me. It brought me comfort to know it was close to me. Plus, I never knew for certain whose house I would stay at each night, and I needed my blanket to sleep. I usually played Wes's music box when I went to bed too, however I had learned to do without it over the weeks. Scott's house was clean and minimally decorated. He had a spare room that he and Tiffany had put a small bed and dresser in for me, and there was a matching set in the spare room at her apartment too, since I had to stay with them while Mom stayed overnight in the hospital. I didn't blame her in the least, but I was growing tired of what was becoming our norm. I wanted my routine back. I wanted my parents back. Mom spent all day by Dad's side, and, on the rare occasion I saw her, she was withdrawn, and she smelled off. Wrong. Scott and I had a wordless dinner together. I scarfed down my food, avoiding his eyes and thinking about my book bag upstairs. He had his laptop on the table, his eyes scanning over his work at high speeds, even with the small red veins that were becoming a permanent fixture. Once I was upstairs, I burrowed down into my bed, tucking the covers up to my nose and squeezing my eyes shut tight to block out the dimming light from outside. I slowed down my breathing and kept my movements subtle and small. I waited until I heard Scott open and shut my bedroom door as he did his checkup on me to see if I was asleep. Some nights, I would already be completely asleep when he'd come in, and I wouldn't hear him. Other nights, I would be wide-eyed and sleepless, and he would pat me on the head and hug me and tell me everything was going to be fine. Even though I knew it was a lie. It was just something adults said when they didn't know what else to say. That night, however, even though I was awake when he checked on me, I didn't move or flinch or blink. I just laid there, feeling as his eyes scanned over me, and listening as he then shut the door soon after. I stayed in bed still, listening for the sound of his shower starting. He always took a shower every night before he went to bed, even if it was well past midnight. When the rush of water in the pipes roared above me and through the walls, I pushed the blankets off of my still-clothed body, slipped my feet into my shoes, pulled my jacket on, put my blanket in my book bag and slung it over my shoulder, and snuck downstairs and out of the house. Scott's home was the closer of the two to the hospital, which was why I picked this night to enact my plan. I'd been paying close attention to each stop and turn we took on our drive from the hospital to his condo until I could recite it to myself in my sleep. It took us only a few minutes in his car, but it took me much longer on foot. I kept my head down and clutched my coat around me, blocking against the slight breeze and the cool spring night air. I didn't look at any of the small number of cars that passed by me. I wore dark clothing, hoping to blend into the night sky and the surrounding greenery on the walk. The only bright bit on me was my hair, the red a beacon in the moonlight. I had my hood up, but even that didn't cover all the vivid and unruly strands. The pitter-patter of my feet on the pavement accompanied me the entire journey to the hospital. I let out a sigh of relief as the parking lot came into sight. I made it, and I met no resistance. I walked right through the entrance and straight over to the elevator, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I knew if I looked at people, someone would question me. If I acted as though I knew what I was doing, like I had a purpose and I belonged there, then I was less likely to be questioned. Luck was on my side as well, since there was hardly a soul in sight. Only one person sat at the front desk, and he was busy on a phone call and checking something on his computer screen, so he didn't even see me as I pressed the up button on the elevator and waited for the doors to open. Again, everything went my way, as no one was in the elevator. I walked in and pressed the button for Dad's floor, and rode up while listening to the elevator music version of Drops of Jupiter. Normally I would hum along, but I couldn't. My stomach twisted and knotted around itself, and my heart raced. My palms had sweat in the center, and I wiped them against my thighs a few times to remove it. When the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, I stepped out and walked towards the hall that led to his room. The employee at the desk here turned, and I ducked down below the counter. For the first time in my brief life, I prayed to anyone listening that she wouldn't see me or walk around the desk. I stayed crouched as I tiptoed around the desk, working my way towards the corner that would block me from her sight. I breathed out a sigh as I stood up straight once I was where I wanted to be. I stepped into Dad's room, finally laying eyes on him for the first time since he'd collapsed in our kitchen. It hadn't been very long, but he already looked way different from what I remembered. His skin had a gray tinge, and his arms were thin and weak. He had tubes going into his nose, and wires connected him to so many machines, and 4 lines connected to his hand. My lip trembled as I took in his appearance. I wanted to press a rewind button so we could go back to that joyful moment in the kitchen. So I could find a way to prevent this from happening. Tears filled my eyes, and I almost missed the sound of the door opening. I darted behind the curtain, tucking myself away as the night shift nurses entered to check on him. "How are his stats?" the male nurse asked. "The same," the female replied. "He's stable, but there hasn't been a change for the better. Or for the worse, which is good, I guess. But the family is miserable." "Yes, I saw the little girl again today. I understand why they don't want her to see him like this, but it's not our place to question that decision," she said. "What about the wife?" The girl sighed. "She left again. I think she goes to the bar down the block every night. When she returns in the morning, she always reeks of alcohol. I don't know if her kids are so busy with everything else that they just don't notice, or if they're just ignoring it, but she needs help." "Have you sent the chaplain in?" "I did, and she told him to leave," she replied. "I mean, I get it. Not everyone finds comfort in religion, but I had to at least try." Their voices faded as they left the room, and I swallowed, trying to get rid of the dry feeling in my throat. I left my hiding spot and set my backpack on the chair and sat on the bed. My hand shook, but I reached out for Dad anyway, gripping his hand in mine as gently as I could. "Dad," I said, my voice breathy and hoarse. "Dad, please, you have to come back." A tear slipped down my cheek, and I wiped at it with haste. Nothing is the same anymore. Everyone is so serious all the time. I never know where I'm going to be at night. And they won't even let me see you. They think they're protecting me, but they're not. I took in a shuddering breath, the air rattling in my lungs, my throat tightening. "And Mom is, she's not good, Dad. She's a mess. She doesn't say anything. She stares off into space." I hug her, and her arms just stay limp at her sides. The tears I had kept at bay for so long finally burst through the dam and fell freely down my face and onto my chin and my shirt. My voice mixed with sobs as I kept talking to him. "So you gotta wake up, Dad. Please. We need you. I can't, please. Please wake up. Wake up. Wake up." I collapsed forward, burying my face into his chest, where there were no cords or wires blocking my contact with him. My whole body shook and heaved as I held in the sounds of my crying. I didn't need to alert the entire floor that I was in here with him. But I needed this. I needed to see him, and touch him, and hug him. I blinked my crusty swollen eyes open against the slowly brightening room, and turned my head towards the commotion at the door. Scott and Tiffany's voices were recognizable over the top of all the noise. I jumped up and grabbed my bag, nausea swirling in my stomach as I rushed towards the door. I hadn't realized I'd fallen asleep. I'd meant to sneak back out and go home. I stopped in my tracks when I saw a cop standing in the room near the door. I swallowed and clutched my bag to my chest, then turned back towards Dad, only to realize I was no longer in his hospital room. My chest rose and fell as I tried to breathe, and my knees shook as they tried to keep me standing. "You're okay," he murmured in what I assumed was supposed to be a comforting voice. But all it did was cause more panic. How had they moved me? Why had they moved me? I needed to be with my dad in case he got better. In case he woke up. How? "The nurses found you asleep in Jack's room," he breathed. "They called us and the social workers." I shook my head. "No," I said. "It's all right, sweetie," he continued. "You're safe. We're just waiting on the new family, and then dash." "No!" I yelled, and I darted forward to the door, my hand grappling with the handle. They couldn't take me away. This was my family. I picked them and they picked me. We were happy. They were going to be my parents and my siblings. They did not need to save me. I was already safe. I had a mom and dad. I wrenched the door open and met the red-rimmed eyes of Tiffany, Scott, and Mom. I tried to run to them, but firm hands gripped me around my waist and held me back. "Let me go!" I cried, squirming in the arms of the cop. My body was hot and my heart pounded from my chest all the way into my head, the sound filling my ears. I fought against his hold and twisted around to break free, but nothing worked. The tears running down my face mixed with the snot coming out of my nose, but I was too busy fighting to reach my family to care. "You don't understand," I said hoarsely. My foot kicked out behind me, making contact with the officer's knee. He grunted and flinched, but didn't lose hold of me. My social worker, Jennifer, stepped between my family and me as I fought against the officer. My bag sat on the floor, forgotten in the scuffle. Mom tried to step around her, but Jennifer stopped her with her arm and a firm shake of her head, glancing behind her towards a second officer in warning. "Haven, it's okay," Mom said, her voice strained. "You need to stop fighting him." I shook my head, too afraid to use my voice. I didn't know what words I would spew if I opened my mouth. "Yes," she retorted, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "You need to go with him, and let us work this out with social services and the authorities." Tiffany looked at her mom with wide eyes. "But Mom dash. Tiff, this is how it has to be," Scott whispered. "We have to do as they ask, otherwise it could be worse for us." A sob broke out of my lips and I went limp in the cop's arms. All the fight left me at Scott's words. The worst part was, all of it was my fault. If I hadn't snuck out, if I hadn't tried to see Dad on my own, then none of this would have happened. The cop lifted me against his chest, cradling me to his body as he bent to grab my bag off of the cold white tile flooring. "I'm sorry," I whimpered, wrapping my arms around my stomach to keep my insides from becoming my outsides. "It's all my fault." "It's not your fault," someone said, but I was too lost in my sorrow to tell who. "I'm sorry," I whispered again as the cop walked me back into the spare hospital room. "I'm so sorry," I repeated over and over again through my tears until my voice was raw, and the only person who could hear me was myself. "Dear Haven, I don't know about you, but I am so ready for spring break. 1 week of no school, no teachers, and no homework? Yes, please. Do you have any plans for the week off? My family and I are heading to the beach to go camping for a few nights, and Reed is coming with us. Then, our town has its annual spring festival. We plant trees and there is usually tons and tons of food and pies and freshly squeezed lemonade. Also, I know it's a ways away, and I know my parents will be talking to your parents about it soon, but this summer I was hoping we could meet in person? I mean, if you want to. I thought it would be fun. We've mentioned meeting in person before, so yeah. Anyway, read you later. Your friend, Wes. P.S. Reed says hi. P.P.S. Damn it, I am so sorry. I told him to leave my shit alone.
Sometime later.
Dear Haven. Hey! It's been a minute. Usually you've written back by now, but maybe you're busy? I know you are going to be starting more ballet classes and private lessons, so I'm guessing you're caught up with that and maybe tired from adjusting to your new schedule. I know when my boxing training gets upped in intensity, I got worn out a bit easier for a few days while I adjust. Have you thought about what I said about this summer? I mean, it's okay if you don't want to. I won't be upset. Oh. I had another question. Well, actually, it was Nolan's question. He told me to pretend like it was mine, but it's really his. He wants to know if you do the type of ballet where you go all the way up on your toes? I don't know if it has a special name or not. We watched a video of it when we sent you those Nutcracker tickets and we all agreed it looks super painful. So do you do that? Does it hurt? Is it hard? Hope to hear from you soon. Your friend, Wes.
Sometime later.
Dear Haven, I hope everything is okay. It's not like you to not write for this long. I hope I didn't say something to offend you or piss you off. My dad says a pissed off woman is the worst kind of woman. That's probably why he's so nice and loving to my mom all the time. I don't blame him. She is scary when she's mad. So, if I did piss you off, then I'm sorry. Was it the summer break thing? Shit, it was the summer break thing, wasn't it? You know what, just forget I mentioned it. We can pretend I didn't, and then we can just go back to how things were before I mentioned it. You know, when you weren't mad at me and you wrote to me at least once a week? Sebastian and Reed and Nolan are worried too. They don't say it outright, but they keep asking me if I've heard from you, and they get a little sad when I tell them no. They'll all deny it if you ask them, though, so don't mention it to them. Seriously, though, I am really sorry if I said or did something to upset or hurt you. Please, please accept my apology. Please write me back. Your friend, Wes.
Sometime later.
Dear Haven, I'm really worried now. Please, just call this number and tell me you're all right. 919-555-2398. Wes.
Sometime later. Wesley's POV.
I stood outside the door to my dad's home office and took in a deep breath. My inside squirmed, and my skin crawled, and my heart raced as I pushed the door open and poked my head inside. Dad, I stopped when I saw my mom sitting on the edge of his desk, facing him, her thumbnail between her teeth, as she listened to him intently. A wrinkle marred her forehead, and her eyes had taken on a worried, glassy look. They both quieted and looked at me, and I just knew. I knew right away that something was wrong. Something happened, and they were trying to decide whether or not to tell me. Wesley, my dad began. What did you need? I swallowed and looked between them. Mom's bottom lip slipped into her mouth, and she stood from her perch, walking to the window to look out of it. She did that whenever she didn't want us to see she was upset or crying. I started to walk to her, but she held her hand up, palm out, stopping me. Answer your father, she murmured. Even though she wasn't able to see me, I nodded. I'm worried about Haven, I admitted, looking back at my dad. I haven't heard from her in weeks. She usually writes me at least once a week, but I haven't gotten a single letter since March. Dad kept his eyes on me as I continued talking, and I tried to ignore the pain and pity I saw there. I know I shouldn't be trying to force a friendship any longer if she doesn't want one. I do. If she really doesn't want to be my friend anymore, I will respect that and leave her alone for the rest of her life. But I really don't think that's the case. I think something else is going on. My gut tells me something else is going on. He sighed and leaned forward, folding his hands together on top of his desk. The sick feeling in the pit of my stomach grew stronger, twisting and stabbing into my gut. The crawling under my skin became more pronounced, and something deep inside of me stirred. Something strong and feral and angry. Your instincts were correct, he told me. Her family contacted us earlier today. What happened to her? I snarled, my fists clenching. Jack had a stroke. He's been in the hospital this whole time, and she's been switching between staying at Scott and Tiffany's houses, so they didn't see your letters until just today, he continued, his voice way too calm for my liking. Okay? I asked. Can't we help? Send them some money, or recommend a doctor? You know people. I exclaimed, gesturing wildly. We did offer that, he said. They are thinking about it. What does any of that have to do with Haven, though? I asked. I gave her my number. Why doesn't she just call me? Dad glanced at my mom over the top of my head. What aren't you telling me? I demanded. Wes dash. Tell me. I growled, and then I flinched back, blinking. But my dad didn't even bat an eye at my outburst. He just looked me straight in the eye and said, they put her in a new home. With a new family. I stared at him. I just stood there in the office and stared at him. There was no way I heard him right. Why would they take her from them? Just because he was in the hospital for a bit? She was happy there, she was thriving there. They wouldn't just take her from the first actual place that felt like home to her. Would they? What? I said finally. They placed her with a new family, he said again with the patience of a saint. But why? Why would they do that? She was healthy and happy and home. Dad blew out a breath and tried to speak, but I kept going. They'll put her back though, right? It's just temporary, until Jack gets better, right? That's why they called? To let us know that we won't be able to reach her until Jack gets better and she can come home? No, Wes. My dad shook his head and ran his hand over his face. She snuck out of Scott's house and walked all the way to the hospital one night to see him. He didn't even know she was gone until the cops called him and told him she was at the hospital. Social services felt it was no longer a safe place for her. So they did a new placement. My brain and my heart both went a mile a minute. I thought my heart would leap out of my chest with how fast it pounded. But my brain was already working in overtime, already working to come up with a solution to this fresh problem in front of me. Okay, so what can we do? I asked. How can we help them? They're going to try to get her back, right? They were planning to adopt her before all this happened, Mom whispered. They are still planning to try, but with this most recent incident, and with other things going on, they likely won't get approved. But we have money and connections, right? We can help them? It doesn't work that way, Wesley. Money can't fix everything. We can help them get a lawyer, but we can't force the system to let them adopt her, she said as she walked to me and placed her hands on my shoulders. Then what good is having all this money if we can't use it to help her? What's the fucking point of our connections and our money? Wesley, my mom scolded, but my dad held his hand out to stop her. There has to be something we can do, I exclaimed, my eyes watering and my voice shaking as I tore myself from her grasp. I won't accept that there is nothing we can do. We are doing everything we can. Everything we legally can, my dad clarified. And Felix and Fiona are also going to try to adopt her. They've always wanted another pup, but Fiona isn't able to have more. So she'll be Nolan's sister? I asked. My dad nodded. If they are able to adopt her, then yes. She'd be Nolan's sister. But she's a human? I pointed out. How will that work? We'll have to get approval from the king and the council. Fiona is already on the phone with them. But she'll know what we are? My dad nodded. Yes. We'd be able to tell her. I inhaled and exhaled a few times, calming my heart and my mind. Nolan's sister. A member of our pack. The knowledge she'd be safe and taken care of and loved soothed the boiling lava in my soul and erased the blackening pit in my heart. He better be nice to her or I'll have to kick his ass, I muttered, crossing my arms over my chest. My mom snorted and roughed up my hair and my dad chuckled and scratched his beard, meeting my mom's eyes over my head. Gamma Felix and Fiona will be here soon to begin the process with us, Dad told me. I promise you, we will keep you updated on everything that is going on with Haven. Can I talk to her? I asked him as he stood and walked to his office door to show me out. He sighed, and his hands rested on his hips. Unfortunately, no, he answered. We have to do this the right way, and they're not giving us the information on where she's staying or anything. And yes, we could hack into the systems or use a witch to find her, he added before I could protest, but we have to play this by the rules and be very careful because of what happened. They're keeping a close eye on the Franklins, and we don't want to raise any red flags against ourselves or the Shepherds. Okay? I nodded slowly. I wanted to push him, wanted to say more, but he was alpha, and I had to listen to him and respect that this was his last word on the situation for now. Wesley, he called out as I exited the room. I promise you on my title and our pact that we will do everything we can to help her. My throat tightened and my eyes itched, the watery feeling in them returning as I listened to him make a solemn oath to me. And the primal thing inside of me settled back into its place, subdued and appeased for the moment.
Wesley's POV.
Have your parents said anything? I asked Nolan as he walked up to me before training. Have they heard anything? I don't know if they've heard anything, and no, they haven't said anything to me, Nolan sighed. And I am sure my answer will be the same tomorrow, he added as he bent down to stretch. I huffed in exasperation. The same answer. The same fucking answer every day since my parents told me Felix and Fiona were trying to adopt Haven. And that was several weeks ago. I tried to be patient, but patience had never been one of my strong suits. I was more of a right now kind of male. That restlessness inside me stirred again, but I pushed it down, tempering it with my breathing and my stretching. It had been happening more and more in the weeks since I learned of Haven's situation with her family. This fierce, feral thing inside of me would rear its ugly head any time I would think about Haven, or someone would mention her, and I would have to refocus and recenter myself to push it back into the recesses of my mind. Dude, I know you're anxious and upset and impatient, but you don't have to growl at me, Nolan muttered. I wasn't growling. You were literally just growling at me, he argued. I didn't growl. You totally growled. Reed chimed in as he plopped onto the grass and leaned back on his palms. Oh, look, his eyes are flashing too. Don't provoke him more, Reed, Nolan scolded. Is it provoking if I'm just pointing out a fact? Reed. Nolan shook his head at him again, his brows raised and eyes wide in warning. Get off your ass and run with me, I grumbled, taking off to run laps around the field without checking to see if they followed. I knew they would. I set a slower pace so they could keep up with me, even though I itched to sprint off some steam. But I also wanted to talk with them, and talk out of earshot of our parents. Did you get them? Reed murmured, and Nolan glanced behind him to check on our dads. Not yet, I grunted back. What's the holdup? Nolan asked. The card. It's locked up tight in the safe, and I don't know the code. Your birthday? Reed asked. No. Maddie's birthday? Nolan suggested. Tried that one. And Seb's. Seb's what? I spun around to see my brother running close enough to us to eavesdrop. Fuck off, I muttered, then turned back forward. No way, he argued. I'll tell Dad you're trying to buy plane tickets to Colorado unless you buy me one too. How did you dash? It doesn't take a genius to figure out what the three of you are trying to buy with the PAX emergency credit card that is kept in the safe, he chuckled with a roll of his eyes. Which I also know the code to, by the way, he added casually, looking at his fingernails, like he didn't just drop a crazy important detail on us. Well, then, tell us, I demanded. Take me with you, he demanded back. I gritted my teeth and stared him down, but he just stared right back, unaffected by my demeanor. He's growling again, Reed Stage whispered, and Nolan snorted but tried to cover it with his hand. Fine, I hissed out between my teeth. What's the code? He grinned in triumph. It's 59226. Why? I asked with a furrowed brow. Because it spells leakin'. I blinked at him a few times before saying, that's a terrible code. I know, right? He laughed. No, Seb, we've watched Harry Potter way too many times. We're not watching it again tonight. If you want to watch it, you can have your own movie night in your own room, Reed said loudly as we rounded the corner nearest our dad's. Sebastian pulled his lips into his mouth and turned his head towards Nolan to hide his cracking facade from our dad's watchful gaze. I smiled at my dad as we passed, and he returned it, although it wasn't his usual smile. My heart sank and my stomach tightened, but I clenched my jaw and kept running, albeit a bit faster than before. Wes, slow down! Reed panted from behind me, but I was locked into my rhythm and unable to break my stride to let them keep up with me. What I wasn't expecting, however, was the sound of footsteps next to me, matching my pace. I glanced to the side, and there was Sebastian, keeping up with my every step. Come on, Wes, I know you can go faster, he taunted, his eyes glinting with a challenge. But underneath his challenge, I could also see his understanding, his knowledge that what I needed was a distraction. I picked up the pace again, and he stayed right by my side. Is that all you've got? I grunted and sped up again, and he did too, but I could see him struggling. That thing inside of me preened with confidence and gave me an extra boost of energy and speed. Sebastian was faster than we realized, but I had trained harder and longer. He could keep up, but he couldn't maintain the speed for much longer. I rushed ahead one last time, giving it everything I had, and Seb fell behind, laughing as the sounds of Reed and Nolan cheering and clapping echoed around our training grounds. I soared around the last corner and finished the straightaway to our dad's, where I lifted my arms in victory and spun around in a celebratory dance as Sebastian came in soon after me. His cheeks were red, and he huffed and panted. But I had never felt more energized and alive. The edginess under my skin no longer felt foreign, but integrated into my soul and the very essence of my being. Good race. Sebastian puffed out between his breaths. I'll get you next time, he added, and I rolled my eyes. We'll see, I chuckled as I walked to the water jugs. I filled my cup several times, gulping the cool water down my burning throat. Nolan and Reed followed close behind with Seb, the three of them whispering and chuckling to each other about the impromptu race we'd just had. I smiled to myself as I listened to their bickering and teasing. They were idiots at times, but I was lucky to have them by my side, lucky that they would be the three closest to me as we led the pack side by side with our mates when it was our time. Their voices softened and then stopped altogether, and a chill ran through my body at the sudden silence and tension in the training yard. That sickening feeling in my stomach returned, and that primal thing within my soul sat up straighter, awake and alert to the approaching threat. I placed my cup on the table, taking care to not crush it or slam it down. I cracked my neck to the right, shaking off the dread settling on my shoulders and my heart. Then I turned around and met the eyes of our parents. Fiona was in Felix's arms, her head resting against his chest and her eyes red-rimmed. He buried his face in her hair, and I could just see the outline of his mouth as he comforted her, although I could not hear what he was saying. My mom and dad were watching them, my mom tucked into my dad's side and his hand stroking her shoulder. Brad stood to the side, watching his friends. Dad turned his face to me, his eyes locking with mine. His gaze was serious and pained and told me everything I needed to know. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want them to tell me, to confirm that what I suspected was true. Their looks, their actions, their emotions were all confirmation enough. But the words were leaving my mouth before I could stop them, spewing out from between my lips without my control. What happened? I asked, but my words were barely audible, not even loud enough to be called a whisper. My dad heard though, or saw my lips moving, or both, and he swallowed and looked down at the ground. What happened? I asked again, louder this time. The adults all looked at each other, the way adults do when they're deciding if they should let you in on what they know, and I lost it. Tell me! I demanded, my hands tensing, my fingers curling. A twinge of pain shot through my body, all the way out through my fingertips, but I ignored it. I focused on my mom instead, on her watery eyes. Wesley, you need to take a deep breath and calm down, she murmured. Just tell me, Mom. I begged, that pain shooting through my body again and causing the veins in my neck to pop as I tried to hold it back. Please, I added, my voice cracking. Dad blew out a breath and then looked me straight in the eyes again. The adoption agency denied Felix and Fiona, he said. They can't adopt Haven. I blinked and then shook my head. I had to have misheard him. No, that doesn't make sense, I said. They are good people, wonderful parents. Anyone can see that. Why would they reject them? It doesn't have anything to do with them as people, my mom said, glancing at Felix and Fiona with a smile. In fact, they approve them to adopt in general, if they choose to. But they can't adopt Haven. But why not? I asked. That thing inside me bristled and edged closer to the surface. I don't understand. What aren't you telling me? They were denied, because someone else already adopted Haven. Another family. But I furrowed my brow and looked at each of them. But you said it could take a long time. Months. Or even longer. Usually it does, Dad said. So then, how did this other family adopt her so quickly? How were they able to do what you weren't? I don't know, Wes. We did everything we could. We dash. No, you didn't fucking do everything you could. I snapped. You focused too much on doing things the right way, on keeping your reputation intact and not cutting corners or doing things under the table or getting your hands dirty. You could have done more. I paced from side to side in agitation, my hands running through my hair and tugging at the strands, trying to cause myself pain somewhere else on my body so I could ignore the pain in my soul. I couldn't explain this intense desire to have her here with us instead of out there with someone else. Maybe because she was human and younger than me and had already been through so much in her life. Or maybe because I knew I was one of the few friends she had made in her life. Whatever the reason, though, I needed her to be with us. Who adopted her? I asked. We don't know. They won't give us that information or a way for you to contact her. They said the court sealed the file. My body stiffened and spasmed, and I stifled a cry at the sharp pain shooting up my spine. Boys, come over here, my mom murmured, waving Reed, Nolan, and Seb over to her and our parents. My dad started walking towards me with slow, precise steps. Wes, you need to dash. No, Dad. This is all your fault. All our fault. She should be here, with us, where she could be safe and happy and healthy, but instead she is with goddess knows who. And she probably thinks I abandoned her or didn't care about her. And I'll never get to tell her that I tried to find a way to help her. Because you're too worried about what others will think about us going out of our way to help a human girl. I held in another cry, and bent forward at the waist, my hands clutching my stomach as it threatened to purge its contents. My dad lunged for me and crouched down next to me, helping me keep my balance as I moved to be on all fours. That's it, Wesley, just let it out, he muttered. Don't try to hold it back. It will make it worse. I hate you. I spat. I know, he said. I hate you. I hate that you failed her, I gasped as my body twitched and stiffened even more, my bones cracking and reassembling under my skin. I hate that I failed her, I croaked out. I'm sorry, he whispered, his hands gripping my shoulders. You wouldn't have to be sorry if you'd done what you promised. I yelled. My spine gave out a resounding crack, and I threw my head back, letting out a pained cry, although it sounded more like a howl. I groaned and clawed at the ground, barely noticing my elongated nails. Everything was louder and brighter and stronger smelling. My heart raced and my nose sniffed at the air as one last painful crack shook my whole body, sending a fire over every single nerve ending in me. And then everything was quiet and loud at the same time. I could hear not only my heartbeat, but my dad's and my mom's and everyone else who was staring at me with wide eyes. I stood up to my full height again, noticing my shredded clothes on the ground. My eyes moved to my hands, now dark gray and covered in fur, with long digits and long sharp nails. I heard my dad shift beside me, and his black lichen looked mine in the eye. I blinked at him and then heard his voice come through my head. Run with me, he said, his first words ever to me through our pack-mind link, run off your pain. He took off towards the tree line, and my lichen followed after him, letting out a howl towards the sky as he did. We ran through the trees for most of the day, and even when the sun went down, I stayed in the forest by myself, still in my newly shifted lichen form. I lost track of time while I was running. With the way I was feeling, it seemed as if I would need a lifetime to run off the pain.